Hi, everyone. This is Jim Hoover, and I'm happy to be talking to you today as part of the DBA Research Symposium. 3 years ago, I was sitting in your seats thinking about graduating and getting back to my job in consulting. And today, I'm a professor here at the University of Florida. And so this could be you one day as well. And congratulations on making it to the end of a very research heavy but really good program. What I want to talk to you today about is business analytics here at UF and what we're doing for the UF programs, both graduate and undergraduate, in terms of analytics. My role here is I've been helping to build this program with the university, and maybe it'll make more sense if I start out explaining a little bit more about myself. I'm going to break this presentation down into two pieces. So the first piece is going to be the focus on explaining business analytics at UF, and then the second piece is going to walk into an example that I use in my marketing analytics class that I teach here at the graduate school. So here's the objectives. First, let me tell you a little bit about myself. Then I'll tell you about the new analytics degree that we're starting and concentration for the MBAs, and also kind of our new undergraduate focus in analytics. Hopefully, if you're thinking about hiring graduates from the University of Florida, you're not going to come teach yourself. Then you listen to what we have to say about the new program, and it'll sound interesting, and perhaps we can have further discussions after you graduate, or maybe even before. Um, then I'm going to walk through a standard analytics approach to analytics projects that has been shown to increase ROI, and I'll give you a very specific example of machine learning using recommender engines, which we did here in our first class in Excel, but you can also do it in other programs as well, like R or Python. So I'm hosting this video on my YouTube channel, which I use in class to post short videos for students to be able to see stuff over again if they didn't see it before, or if they run into problems and they send me something, I can quickly put up a YouTube video on the website and they can go look at it. This one specifically I'm hosting just for you DBAs, but I do something similar for um, folks who are in my master's program as well. And additionally, we're going to use a spreadsheet to do the example when we get to that. And both of these are hyperlinks to both sites. And I'll include those in the email that Angie sends out to you so that you guys can click on them as well and follow along. So here's a little bit about my background. So I did 25 years in the Navy. My background is in supply chain, and I was part of the Navy Supply Corps. So we did work in parts management, food service management, transportation, logistics, inventory management, forecasting, um, just about anything to do with supporting the Navy logistically. I did that for 25 years. And while I was in the Navy, I also got my MBA here at the University of Florida. And my focus during the MBA, my concentration was in decision information sciences and marketing research. When I retired from the Navy in 2009, I joined Accenture as a senior manager, ultimately was promoted to managing director, and also a client account lead for the Navy account ultimately. I was at Accenture for 10 years. During the 10 years that I was at Accenture, I was specialized in focusing on analytics and supply chain management, same kind of stuff that I did while I was in the Navy. Used to be called operations research, but more recently morphed into analytics. I also had a job in addition to my day job running an account, $100 million account. I had a secondary job where I built up the analytics practice in the federal arm of Accenture. Accenture is about a 560,000 person company right now, and in federal we probably had 6,000 people, and in analytics we started out pretty small when I took over in 2014, and we were up to probably 300 people who were consultants in analytics by the time I transitioned it to somebody whose sole job was to do analytics in 2018. Um, while I was at Accenture, I also finished my DBA. I started in 2014, the first class, and I did my dissertation on how people make privacy choices in a big data world. So loved the program, loved my cohort, was happy to graduate in 2017. Went back to Accenture, continuing to do my consulting job. I also started in 2018 teaching business analytics to masters in accounting students at Florida Southern College. It was an online course, taught me a lot about teaching online, taught me about how to use YouTube like I'm using today. So, that was a great way to continue to keep my hands in the mix of teaching um, while I was working at Accenture. In late 2018, I received a call from Florida saying, "Hey, we've been looking for someone to help us build out our analytics programs, and we struggled to find somebody. You have the right degree, and you come highly recommended. So would you be interested?" And at the time, I really was not planning on leaving Accenture. Um, but I'm from Florida and my wife is from Florida. We wanted to come back. And so we talked about it, talked about what it would mean. And it's just, if it had been any other school than UF, I would have turned it down probably. But, being at the best school in the state and being back home again was awesome. So I've been here now for about a year. I've taught classes, the core marketing class to the MBA and the specialized master students. I've taught the new product development, and I've also taught marketing analytics. And in the fall, we're going to talk about that soon. In the fall, we're going to be standing up a new Master of Science in Business Analytics, and I'll be teaching a lot of courses in that curriculum as well as running a practicum. So, there's a standard set of analytics methodologies, and we're going to build that practicum around a standard process, standard approach to doing analytics in a business. Why would you want to have a standard process, you would ask? Well, first of all, it gives everybody a very clear picture end to end of what success looks like. It helps people who are not analytics professionals understand what the team is doing. It kind of helps facilitate, ensure that an ROI is achieved by an analytics team, which isn't always true. Um, and it gives the people who are on the team detailed steps to make sure that they can develop their project plan adequately. So there's several different kind of regular analytics methodologies that are used by firms. The one that's used the most is this CRISP DM process, cross industry reference process for data mining. And if you're an engineer, you're going to love this when I show you this. And additionally, there are others that are less used. That the first one is used by about 50% of analytics teams. The last one, firm-specific methodology, is probably the second most popular one. It's based on kind of the domain you're in, the functional background you're in, and whether or not you have something very specific. Let me show you what those look like and maybe make a little bit more sense. So this first thing I want to show you is called the CRISP DM reference model, and there are multiple steps in there. It always starts with this concept of business understanding, and a successful analytics project is always going to need to have the basis for why are we doing this analytics process. And normally that comes from the functional area, not from the analytics lead themselves. They don't think these things up themselves, but rather the business problem gets stated by the business functional person, either the sponsor or the person the sponsor designates to be on the team. The second step in this process is data understanding. And from a data understanding point of view, you would think, oh, that's something that the analytics team does. Well, actually, they do it in conjunction with the business subject matter expert that gets assigned to the team, because the data teams, for the most part, don't know what's in the databases that the business has. And even if they were to get something like a data dictionary, they don't understand what the problems might be related to the data that's in the data tables that the business has. So this is a jointly developed business understand or data understanding that occurs after you've got the business understanding. And normally in this step also, you'll think about kind of what modeling techniques, given the business understanding, might be potentially considered to be used when it gets to the modeling step. Um, Data understanding also identifies kind of all the problems that you would see in data. These problems include things like missing data or erroneous data. Um, if you haven't heard it before, 60 to 70% of all of the analytics projects that occur, of the work that occurs to make an analytics model, is generally around figuring out how to get good data into the model and what to do with outliers and things like that, all of that. So you would develop a data understanding. Once you've developed that data understanding, you pass it off to a team to do data preparation. And normally this is done by somebody who today is called the data engineer. And the data engineer not only will do this data cleansing, data manipulation, data transformation, but they will also join tables, put data into a data set that can be used for modeling. They will also think about the kind of construction of where the data is going to be ultimately in production. So that data preparation step, between data understanding and data preparation, 60 to 70% of the work for the effort. The next step is modeling, and in modeling, what you're going to do is determine, given the business problem that was stated originally and what success will look like to the business owner, they will look for the models that actually will achieve the outcome that the business owner is looking for. When I say the outcome, I just mean, like, is it capable of actually yielding a result, not that the result itself is guaranteed to be good. So once the model gets selected, they also will establish a test approach. And test approach normally in a lot of analytics projects involves separating data into a training data set where they build the model, and a validation data set or a test data set where they test whether or not the model holds up with data that wasn't used to produce the model itself. And once they've built the model, tested the model, then they assess whether or not the model works as expected. The next step is to re-involve the business people again and ask whether or not the outcome of the modeling process is useful for executing the business purpose and meets the business outcome that was originally identified in that first step. This is your essentially go no go point where you make this decision on whether or not you need to go back and redo something, get more data, or no, it looks like, hey, we've resolved the problem and developed a model that addresses it. If that's the case, then you're going to make this go no go step to do deployment. And deployment, we used to call it putting it in production, is where you take a model and you put it into whatever system, whatever decision-making process it is that the business people in the organization are going to use to make decisions or to execute. And an example would be that if I built a model to detect credit card fraud, and it looks like it's pretty good at detecting credit card fraud. The model itself I might have built in one language, but then in order to run in a credit card environment where transactions have to be approved or disapproved, in milliseconds, I may have to recode that model to put it in deployment. So that deployment is the last step. This is an older model. This standard process is an older reference model, and one of the things that's been added in a lot of the newer models is after you deploy it, models tend to deteriorate over time, become less effective, and so you have to also go back and revisit it. But basically, these are all the steps. And if I showed you any of the other different kinds of models that people use for doing an analytics project, you pretty much see all these steps pretty much in the same order. They might call them something different. They might focus on certain aspects differently, but this is a pretty key approach to doing analytics. What you'll see over on the left is a visual representation of what I just said, and over on the right is kind of, you can see all of the individual deliverables that occur at each step and the processes that occur at each step. This model has got multiple levels of detail in it, and if you're an engineer, you'd kind of love the way this looks under the hood. So back to what I was just saying, what you can see if I look at the modeling step, you can see individual actions that need to occur, all of the individual major actions that need to occur. This would be like a level 2 discussion of what occurs in the modeling step. And then underneath the level 2 would be a level 3 where you break down the modeling technique and modeling assumptions, for example, and it would tell you exactly what you would need to do in each of the steps. Here's a picture, though, of a firm-specific analytics methodology, and I'll tell you that this is one that we used at Accenture on our teams, and we always started with understanding the business problem. Secondarily, we spent a lot of time evaluating data sources because we were a consulting firm and that they weren't our own data sources. So we think about what data does the government agency have access to or could have access to. Then we talk about the analytic technique and pick it. And then we spent a lot of time at Accenture focusing on picking the right technologies. In other words, you look at what tools they already have at an agency and then potentially use those tools as opposed to another tool that you might want to use. Then we run the model, test the model, validate it with the client, and then ultimately Accenture spends a lot of time thinking about integrating it back into the business processes that exist and the systems that exist at that agency. What you can see if you look at this thing overall is that it looks very similar to the CRISP DM process with some different focus areas like the focus on technology as well as the extra focus on the availability of data sources. So this is a picture of the kind of teams that you would put out there. And on the left of this chart, what you see is a picture by McKinsey of who they picture as an agile team to do an analytics project. They have quite a few people on this team, perhaps not as agile as I would normally use at Accenture. Over on the right-hand side is a picture of the team that I would normally have. It would be 4 to 5 people that's led by a data scientist who would also have a project lead position. The functionalist is the person from the business area that actually is requesting the analytics project. And the functionalist would bring kind of that deep domain knowledge plus knowledge of the data that we talked about. They also would confirm once the model gets built that, yeah, it meets the original intent of the business problem and the outcome they were looking for. Statistician and data analyst would be somebody who actually does the models and understands kind of statistical analysis behind a lot of the models. The data engineer is the one who's going to do the extract, transform, and load and place it into a database or a data cloud. They also do kind of the data manipulation, or we call it data wrangling, data munging. And then lastly, there's probably like the hands-on person, either a business analyst or a technical analyst, who kind of does whatever the data scientist, the statistician, data engineer has for them to do in order to produce both the model, produce the transformations, produce kind of the business briefing of the model outcomes. And that team would be, we would normally at Accenture try to take a complete project from end to end in 3 to 4 weeks. So if you came up with a very big project and you just started out with a business objective for that project, it would only take us about 3 to 4 weeks, and we would do those continuously. Um, and that's, I think, pretty typical of at least the consulting approach to doing analytics. So that kind of leads us to, hey, what are we doing here at UF in order to produce people like this? I can tell you that for me, I found it very difficult to find people um, who are good at analytics to add to my consulting teams. And I had several different approaches. One approach was to hire from schools like North Carolina State University and Kellogg. They have 1 year masters in analytics programs. And we did not have anything like that here at UF. And I mentioned that when I was on the other side in industry saying, hey, I would love to hire people from UF, but they need to have this kind of core understanding of analytics in order to be useful to me. And, you know, I used to also hire business grads who I would train, who showed some capability of doing analytics projects. And some of my best people were people that I trained ourselves through different kind of approaches at Accenture. Um, but what I really wanted was a lot more undergrads, grad students that I could pull in to be able to put immediately on one of those small teams like I just showed you before. So when I thought about what are the biggest kind of areas, that I need to have people do, and I looked at the programs that we were hiring from when I got hired here at UF and then asked to put together this track along with the folks in the ISOM department. I looked at, you need to have an underlying understanding of the business processes that you're trying to build an analytics solution for. And in this, what you can see is kind of three work streams. You can see the green is the underlying business understanding, and it's got kind of the core accounting, it's got core marketing, it's got core finance, it's got core management classes in there as kind of the basis for people who are more technically oriented to understand the business purpose. And then it clearly in the blue, those classes for the functional areas are in green. And then in the blue, what you see is kind of the curriculum that is related to doing analytics, both learning the languages that and tools that are being used, as well as kind of understanding specific business problems like in marketing analytics that you can then employ or at least be a part of a team to employ when you get hired. So that's the second kind of work stream that you see here in this curriculum track. So you've got a technical track, you've got a business track, and then the third track, which I think is critical, is this is a 1 year program. It's 11 months. That's pretty typical of these analytics degrees, Master of Science in Analytics degrees. The curricula at the bottom in orange is what we call the practicum. And it starts out with a boot camp in R, which is a statistical programming language. And then it moves into a 3 semester or a 3 module effort working with a real business with real data and a real problem using that analytics process we talked about earlier. So we will break into teams just like you saw earlier, and then we will approach a problem with a partner business who's going to provide us with data, and they're also going to provide us with somebody who's going to participate as a subject matter expert with our team. And the outputs they're going to get are the same as you would get if you hired a consulting company to kind of run that same project for you. So in the first practicum you see here in Module 2, we'll do the business understanding, data understanding, and data prep. And then in Module 3, we'll do the modeling and modeling assessment. And then in Module 4, we'll do the model validation model or model assessment with the business. And then we'll also do the brief out to business. We'll do everything in this path except for going into production, which will be up to the business that we partner with. So we have already stood up and identified a number of companies that we want to partner with. We think the first class is going to have about 60 people in it. And if we do, and there are 5 people in each of the teams, that means about 12 teams. So we're looking to fill this up with about 12 businesses who are going to partner with us this year. At other schools, they charge normally about $5,000, or like at UPenn, they charge even much more than that to participate in the program. This is our first year. I think all we're going to be doing is asking companies to sign a partnership agreement that they'll commit to providing the data, the business problem, and the hours of the people that are going to, participate with the team once a week or so to be able to, complete a project during the course of the 1-year track. The benefit to the business, in addition to seeing an actual problem solved, is they get exposure to people who are in the program, and potentially they may want to consider hiring some of these folks. So I think, that was the same thing I did when I was hiring for Accenture to fill the analytics practice there. So I think this process that we see here is going to deliver graduates that are going to be, able to be integrated into your teams very quickly. And even some of the people that are going through the analytics programs that we have right now here at Florida are being snapped up by Florida businesses. But if you'd like to participate, my email is on that connection, the first page connection in this presentation, and you can feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be glad to talk to you about what we're doing there. There will be also, in addition to having the partnership agreement, we'll have an NDA as well, so that you get to control what happens to your data, and you also get to control what happens to the outcome at the end. So for those of you that are interested, here's a few books that I use in my marketing analytics class, and we're going to do an actual example from one of these books next to kind of make it real. And I'll describe the book on the left, Predictive Marketing, is one that I use in class, and basically it describes the business purpose for doing predictive marketing efforts and kind of what you can expect as an outcome. It doesn't have anything to do with the models. The models are not discussed in there. They just talk about, like, hey, this is how you do a recommender engine, and then they say, here's the outcomes that you can expect by doing it. Then in the middle is a marketing analytics book by Wayne Winston. It's Excel based, and they walk through a lot of kind of core marketing analytics efforts. And that's the one that I taught the marketing analytics class to the MBA and master's students in the spring. Over on the right is where we're going with the new program. And this is more of using a statistical program like R to do the same kind of efforts that are identified in predictive marketing and executed in Excel with marketing analytics. We'll do all of those things over in R. And that's kind of where the market is right now. And, these books are fairly reasonable. And if you have somebody who, is a young person who's very adept at Excel, and you want to try to see if you can train them to do marketing analytics, you have holes to fill there, I recommend, kind of looking at these books as a quick investment in your people. So what we're going to do next is we're going to talk about recommendation engines. So I'm going to stop this presentation right now, save it, and then I'm going to record a separate lecture on recommendation engines using Excel.